Garrett Hale thrived on dominance, authority, and certainty. Nothing in his realm ever took him by surprise, until two identical 6-year-old girls materialized before him, their wide blue eyes fixating on his. "Sir, we seem to have lost our way," one of them remarked. The other inclined their head in agreement. "We had been searching for you." Garrett stood still, thoughts swirling in his head. In search of him, before he had the chance to fully grasp the situation, a sharp exhale escaped him. "Very well," he murmured. "Let's work through this together." Garrett Hale hurried along the sidewalk, his gaze fixed forward as he glanced at his watch. He arrived late for a meeting, an occurrence that was quite rare for him. His existence was founded on strict adherence to discipline and self-control, and tardiness was a flaw he refused to accept, particularly within himself. The driver stood by the curb, the polished black car shining brilliantly in the warm glow of the late afternoon sun. Just as he extended his hand toward the door handle, a faint voice halted him. "Excuse me, sir?" Garrett pivoted abruptly, a scowl forming on his face. Just a few feet away stood two little girls, no older than 6. Identical dark curls framed their small faces, while their striking blue eyes, unmistakably the same shade as his own, looked up at him, reflecting a blend of uncertainty and determination. His initial reaction was to look around, hoping to spot a worried parent or guardian, but the sidewalk lay largely deserted. The young women found themselves in solitude. "Do you feel disoriented?" he inquired, maintaining a steady tone. One of them paused, her teeth grazing her lip as she shook her head in uncertainty. The one who appeared a bit more self-assured took a step ahead. "Your presence was sought after." Garrett tensed, his hold on the car door becoming more rigid. That was an unexpected response from him. "You were searching for me?" he reiterated, his tone steady. The two girls nodded in unison. Garrett experienced an unsettling sensation take root in his chest. Children weren't merely on the hunt for corporate CEOs. There was an unsettling feeling about this situation. "Where might your parents be?" he inquired. The more daring twin paused for just a moment before responding. "In the comfort of my own space." Garrett squinted, his gaze sharp and focused. "Are they aware of your presence?" This time, the response was not as prompt. The more reserved twin adjusted her position, her grip on the strap of her petite backpack growing firmer. The subtle hint of remorse on her face revealed all he required to understand. "No," she confessed quietly. Garrett let out a slow breath, his gaze shifting back and forth between the two of them. Their lack of fear only deepened the oddity of the moment. Why had they come, if they weren't lost and their parents were unaware of their presence here? "What was it that prompted you to seek me out?" he inquired, arms crossed defiantly. The young women shared a fleeting look. The individual who had been more vocal retrieved an item from her backpack and extended it towards him. The photograph was aged and weathered. Garrett accepted it, his breath hitching as his eyes landed on the picture. It was indeed him. A young man, clad in a relaxed button-down shirt, stands next to a woman with gentle brown eyes and dark, curly hair. He recognized this image. He was familiar with her. Mallory Carter, a name that had slipped from his mind for years. His gaze darted back to the twins, a chill creeping down his spine. The girls spoke softly. "She's our mom." Garrett felt his heart racing, a steady thrum echoing in his ears. He glanced once more at the photograph, then shifted his gaze to the two little girls with matching blue eyes. After years of certainty, Garrett Hale found himself at a loss for words. Garrett gazed intently at the photograph in his hand, his fingers gripping the frayed edges with increasing intensity. The image bore a slight fade, yet the identities of the two figures within it were unmistakable, him and Mallory. Years had passed since he last laid eyes on her, and she had faded from his thoughts long ago. Yet here he stood, on a bustling sidewalk, faced with two little girls who insisted she was their mother. His thoughts surged through a whirlwind of possibilities, seeking an explanation that resonated with clarity. Perhaps it was an error. Perhaps they mistook someone else for the intended target. Perhaps this was an intricate misinterpretation. Yet, as he gazed at them once more, those expansive blue eyes looking up at him with serene expectation, he understood instinctively that it was far from a blunder. "Where is your mother now?" he inquired, his tone measured, though lacking the usual steadiness. "At home," the more daring twin declared. "She remains unaware of our presence." Garrett sensed a change stirring within him. "You fled." The reserved girl paused momentarily before giving a slight nod. "We sought to discover your whereabouts." He clutched the photo more firmly, absorbing their words. Mallory did not send them. They arrived independently, suggesting that she either hadn't mentioned him or hadn't anticipated their paths would cross. Regardless of the circumstances, they had located him, and now he faced two 6-year-old girls before him, anticipating something from him that he wasn't certain he could provide. "You really shouldn't have done that," he remarked, his fingers threading through his tousled dark curls. He found himself unaccustomed to the presence of children, especially not two who had pursued him in such a manner. "Your mother is likely filled with concern." The first twin, Lily, as he would come to understand, moved ever so slightly. "We believed she would remain oblivious." Garrett exhaled deeply, his fingers pressing against the bridge of his nose. He had constructed his existence around order, mastery, and deliberate choices. Everything in his realm was meticulously orchestrated. However, two small girls appearing unexpectedly, their eyes reflecting his own. This was beyond anything he could have anticipated. "How did you manage to track me down?" he finally inquired. Sophie, the more reserved twin, retrieved an item from her backpack, a piece of paper meticulously folded multiple times. She passed it to him, and as he opened it, he instantly identified what it was. A physical document containing the address of his company. Garrett scowled. "Where did you obtain this?" Lily confessed, tucked away in a box in her mother's closet. She possessed a collection of letters and documents. "We came across your name and decided to search for it." Garrett took a deep breath, striving to hold back the rising irritation within him. They sifted through Mallory's belongings, discovered his name, and somehow navigated their way here without her awareness. That in itself was a bold move. Yet, what burdened him even more was the realization that Mallory had evidently preserved remnants of him in her existence, despite never having made an effort to connect. He finally said, "You ought to have informed her of your destination." Sophie glanced at him, a hint of concern etched on her face. "We didn't think you'd be upset," she remarked. "We were simply curious about your identity." Her words pierced through him more profoundly than he anticipated. Garrett had dedicated years to evading connections, steering clear of anything that could anchor him. He had never pondered the possibilities of what could have unfolded after he and Mallory parted ways. He had never once considered the possibility of two little girls maturing in a world where his identity remained a mystery to them. And now they had arrived. He spoke softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "You know now. What comes next?" The young women exchanged glances before turning their attention back to him. "Is it possible for us to speak with Mom first?" Lily inquired. Garrett let out a breath. That was the sole element that resonated with clarity. He felt utterly helpless standing on the sidewalk with two lost children, unable to feign any sense of direction for what to do next. "Hop in," he said, gesturing to his polished black car. "I'm bringing you back home." As they climbed in, Garrett settled into the driver's seat, his hands firmly clutching the steering wheel. He arrived today anticipating a standard business meeting. Instead, he found himself behind the wheel, transporting two young girls, his daughters, to meet a woman he hadn't laid eyes on in nearly 7 years. For the very first time, he stood before that door, completely unaware of what awaited him beyond it. The journey to the girls' home was subdued, yet it lacked the familiar ease of silence that Garrett typically appreciated. The stillness hung thick in the air, brimming with unspoken inquiries he hesitated to voice and responses he feared might shatter his resolve. Lily and Sophie nestled in the back seat, their petite frames scarcely occupying the plush leather seats of his car. He was taken aback by their lack of fear. If anything, they appeared anticipatory, It was as though they had always been aware that he would lead them back to where they belonged. Garrett's fingers curled around the steering wheel with a sense of purpose as he navigated onto a well-known street. It had been years since his last visit, yet everything appeared unchanged. The row of townhouses, the tree-lined sidewalk, the small neighborhood park at the end of the block. It all seemed like a scene captured in a moment, untouched by the passage of time. He arrived at a humble yet tidy home and parked in the driveway. Soon as he turned off the engine, the front door swung wide open. Mallory stood on the porch, her dark brown hair gathered in a haphazard bun, her face etched with concern. The moment she caught sight of the twins in the back seat, her face transformed from fear to relief, and then to a more intense emotion, anger. Before Garrett could even exit the car, she was already approaching them, her strides brisk and imbued with intent. Lily, Sophie. Her voice was filled with urgency, tinged with longing. What was on your mind? The moment Garrett unlocked the doors, both girls burst out of the car in a flurry of excitement. They hurried to their mother, their heads bowed in remorse as she enveloped them in a warm embrace. Apologies, Mom, Sophie whispered softly against her shoulder. Lily spoke gently. We simply wish to see him. Mallory tightened her hold before releasing slightly, her hands clasping their arms with a gentle yet steady grip. You scared me half to death, she said, her voice trembling. It's not acceptable to just leave without a word. Garrett lingered next to his car, observing the drama that was playing out before him. He had steeled himself for anger, for accusations, but he hadn't anticipated the unfiltered emotion in Mallory's eyes as she gazed at her daughters. At last, she stood tall, her eyes locking onto his. What brings you here? She inquired, her voice tinged with doubt. Garrett locked eyes with her, maintaining a steady tone. They arrived in search of me. I brought them back to my place. Mallory let out a sharp breath, her fingers pressing against her temple. Naturally, they did. She glanced over her shoulder at the girls. Step inside. At this moment, Lily and Sophie exchanged uncertain looks, stealing a glance at Garrett before finally nodding in agreement. They approached the house, their gazes cast downward, while the two adults remained in a charged silence. As the front door clicked shut, Mallory folded her arms across her chest. She spoke, her voice measured and calm. Now you are aware. Garrett inclined his head with deliberation. Indeed, at this moment, clarity has been achieved. She released a harsh chuckle, her head shaking in disbelief. Certainly took some time, didn't it? His jaw tightened. You never shared that with me, Mallory. Her expression grew steely. Could it have changed anything? Garrett found himself at a loss for words, and the fact that he didn't frustrate him more than anything else. Mallory let out a weary sigh, her hand brushing over her face in a moment of exasperation. I prefer not to handle this in public. Step inside. He paused briefly, contemplating before ascending the steps behind her. The interior of the house exuded warmth and a sense of life. It may not have been large, but it brimmed with vitality. Children's drawings adorning the fridge, a basket of laundry resting by the couch, and a handful of toys strewn about near the stairs. The aroma wafted through the air, a blend of cinnamon and a hint of floral notes, evoking a sense of familiarity that stirred a tightness in his chest. Mallory waved her hand in the direction of the kitchen. Take a seat. Garrett slid into a chair at the quaint wooden table, observing her as she filled her cup with coffee before glancing in his direction. Are you interested in having one? She inquired. Negative. She nonchalantly shrugged, savoring a sip before settling down across from him. Silence enveloped them, stretching on for what felt like an eternity. At last, Mallory placed her cup on the table and met his gaze directly. I never intended for you to discover this. Garrett let out a slow breath. What is the reason? She released a dry, mirthless laugh. Are you seriously inquiring about that? Indeed, Mallory. I am, he replied, his tone unwavering yet resolute. You must have realized I would have been curious to find out. She gazed at him intently for what felt like an eternity before she finally responded. Upon discovering my pregnancy, I considered sharing the news with you, she confessed. I truly did. Yet you had already departed, Garrett. You were ascending in your journey, carving out your identity. And I was aware of the consequences that would follow if I shared that with you. His brow knitted in concentration. Could you clarify what you mean? She reclined in her chair, crossing her arms. She stated it plainly. You would have felt a sense of obligation. Not out of desire, but because it was the morally correct choice. I had no desire for that. I didn't want you in their life because I felt obligated. I desired your presence in their life because you wished to be a part of it. Garrett tightened his jaw. That choice wasn't yours to decide. Perhaps not, Mallory conceded. Yet I accomplished it regardless. Once more, silence enveloped them, but this time it felt more oppressive. Garrett cast a quick look toward the living room, where the soft murmur of the girls' conversation drifted down from upstairs. His daughters. He finally expressed his desire to be a part of their lives. Mallory observed him intently. What is the reason for this moment? He expressed that he ought to have been present from the very start. They sought me out. That must hold significance. She gazed at her coffee cup, her finger following the curve of the rim. As she began to speak once more, her tone had taken on a gentler quality. She confessed that they had always been curious about you. I always spoke the truth to them. I simply never provided them with answers. It seems that only heightened their curiosity. Garrett inclined his head with deliberation. Mallory inhaled deeply. Very well, she replied. If you genuinely wish to be a part of their lives, then demonstrate it. His eyes narrowed with intensity. In what way? She offered him a faint, weary smile. Be present. It appeared to be the most straightforward challenge, yet it somehow seemed like the most difficult one. Garrett dedicated years to attending meetings, engaging in business deals, and negotiating contracts valued in the millions. However, this felt unique. This time, he was not merely demonstrating his worth to a panel of executives. He was demonstrating his worth to them. The journey back to his penthouse was silent, yet Garrett's thoughts were anything but tranquil. He held the steering wheel firmly. His jaw set tight as he went over every word Mallory had spoken. She had withheld them from him. His daughters. The frustration he experienced in her kitchen remained, bubbling just beneath the exterior. Yet, underneath it all, there lay something more, something profound. Remorse. Despite his desire to be angry with Mallory, he found it impossible to overlook the reality of the situation. She was correct about one aspect. In those days, he would have been at a loss for what to do. He had become overly consumed by his career, fixated on demonstrating his worth in the corporate arena. Had she confided in him, would he have chosen wisely? He was unaware. That uncertainty felt far more daunting than the anger itself. As he finally navigated into the dimly lit underground parking garage of his building, he exhaled slowly, attempting to untangle the thoughts swirling in his mind. He exited the car and made his way directly to the elevator, hardly noticing the doorman who welcomed him. The penthouse remained exactly as he had remembered it, immaculate, quiet, and undisturbed. The expansive windows showcased the city skyline, with the shimmering lights of towering buildings extending infinitely beyond the transparent barrier. The view was nothing short of a dream come to life, but at this moment it simply seemed hollow. He strolled over to the bar, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. With a deliberate sip, he gazed out at the sprawling cityscape. His thoughts wandered back to the events of earlier that evening. The expressions on Lily and Sophie's faces when they inquired about his identity were unforgettable. Their tight embrace around Mallory when they sensed her distress. They were not merely two ordinary children. They belonged to him, his daughters. A peculiar, unaccustomed feeling coursed through him at the thought. It stood apart from commerce, from transactions, from anything he had ever navigated previously. It was not an obstacle he could navigate with mere tactics. He had dedicated years to making choices that influenced whole industries, yet he had never faced a decision as crucial as this one. Is it possible for him to accomplish this? Would they truly desire that from him? The sudden buzz of his phone yanked him from his reverie. He cast his eyes downward at the display. Mallory. He paused for just a moment before responding. Indeed, a moment of silence lingered before her voice broke through the stillness. The girls can't seem to stop discussing you. Garrett let out a breath, his fingers gliding through his tousled curls. Is that a positive development? Mallory released a gentle chuckle, though a hint of weariness lingered beneath the surface. I'm still uncertain. A profound stillness lingered in the air between them. At last, she let out a deep breath. Observe. Today was quite overwhelming. For everyone. However, if you truly intend to be a part of their lives, I must be assured that your commitment is genuine. Not merely today. Not solely during moments of ease. Garrett rested against the counter, his gaze fixed on the deep hue of the liquid swirling in his glass. I truly meant what I said, he responded. I desire to be present. A moment of silence followed, then a softer voice emerged. Then demonstrate it. Garrett's brow furrowed ever so slightly. In what way? Mallory stated plainly, return tomorrow. Engage in moments with them. Familiarize yourself with them. He took a deep breath, then gave a subtle nod, though she remained unaware of it. Understood. All right, she replied. Looking forward to our meeting tomorrow. She terminated the conversation before he had the chance to utter another word. Garrett placed his phone aside and savored another deliberate sip of whiskey. For the first time in his life, he was venturing into an unknown realm beyond his grasp. There exists a sense of ambiguity, something chaotic. Yet, oddly enough, it didn't frighten him as much as one might expect. For the first time in years, his mind was free from thoughts of transactions, gains, or dominance. He found himself lost in thoughts of them. Garrett showed up at Mallory's house the following afternoon, ahead of schedule. He lingered in his car for a moment, gazing at the front door, attempting to dismiss the strange heaviness resting on his chest. He had entered boardrooms packed with cutthroat executives, brokered billion-dollar agreements with individuals who would betray their own kin for gain, and yet, nothing had ever left him feeling as ill-equipped as this. With a deep breath, he exited the car and approached the porch. Just as he raised his hand to knock, the door abruptly swung open. Lily remained still, her eyes wide as she gazed up at him, a look of astonishment crossing her features. Welcome, you've arrived. Garrett raised an eyebrow. It seems you were caught off guard by my presence. She simply shrugged her shoulders. Mom mentioned you would be here, but Sophie suggested you could reconsider. There was something about that resonated deeply. So, what are your thoughts? Lily inclined her head, pondering. I assumed that if you truly wished to be present, you would arrive ahead of time. Garrett wore a subtle smirk. It seems I've successfully navigated the challenge. Just as she was about to speak again, Sophie emerged from behind her. She fixed her gaze on him for a brief moment before tilting her head ever so slightly. Mom, he's really here. Mallory's voice floated in from the kitchen. Allow him entry before you continue with the announcements, Sophie. The twins moved aside, allowing Garrett to enter, enveloped by the comforting warmth of the house. The aroma of sweetness wafted through the space, reminiscent of cinnamon and vanilla. The living room exuded a sense of warmth and familiarity, its tidy yet lived-in appearance enhanced by personal touches. A collection of picture frames adorning the shelves, a cozy blanket casually draped over the couch, and a few toys scattered near the staircase, hinting at the life that unfolded within its walls. It was a stark contrast to the chilly, sparse penthouse he came back to each evening. Mallory stepped out of the kitchen, her hands drying on a dish towel. She cast a quick glance at the clock, then offered him a look of approval. You've arrived ahead of schedule. Garrett gave a nonchalant shrug. Lily mentioned that this was the sole method to demonstrate my desire to be present. Mallory offered a subtle smile, gently shaking her head. They possess a resilience that belies their appearance. Lily beamed with delight. Comes from our mother. Mallory let out an exasperated sigh. All right, it's time to stop the collective criticism. Please, you both should grab your coats. We are heading out. Garrett lifted an eyebrow in curiosity. We exist. Mallory gave a slight nod. I thought that if you're genuinely interested in getting to know them, then awkwardly sitting in my living room might not be the most effective approach. He found it hard to dispute that. Moments later, they found themselves in his car, making their way to the park. The girls engaged in lively conversation in the back seat, occasionally directing their words to him, other times to one another, creating a surprisingly cozy atmosphere that filled the silence. "So, you have a lot of wealth, don't you?" Sophie inquired abruptly. Garrett stole a look at her in the rearview mirror. "Something along those lines." Lily inclined her body ever so slightly. "What is the extent of wealth?" Mallory let out a weary breath. "Young women, excuse me?" Lily remarked with a sense of purity. "That's a reasonable inquiry." Garrett wore a sly grin. "Abundant enough." Sophie narrowed her eyes at him. "Imagine being wealthy enough to own a pet tiger." Garrett let out a soft laugh. "What purpose would a tiger serve for me?" Lily gave a nonchalant shrug. "As the leader of the company, CEOs occasionally engage in peculiar behaviors." Mallory let out a frustrated sigh. "It's important not to jump to conclusions about every CEO being irrational." Sophie folded her arms across her chest. "So, what's the use of wealth if you lack something impressive?" Garrett paused to reflect. "I possess an aircraft." The twins shared astonished looks. "Do you possess an aircraft?" Lily inquired. Garrett gave a slight nod. "And a chopper." Sophie's jaw fell slack in astonishment. "Is it possible for us to take a ride in it?" Mallory shifted in her seat. "Certainly not." Garrett wore a sly grin. "Perhaps in the future." The twins exchanged hushed, eager whispers while Mallory cast him a sharp, warning look. He merely shrugged, finding it amusing how swiftly they had embraced the concept. In the park, the girls dashed forward, their joyous laughter echoing through the cool autumn breeze. Garrett stood next to Mallory, observing as they ascended onto the swings. After a brief pause, she remarked, "They have a fondness for you." Garrett cast a fleeting look in her direction. "Indeed." Mallory gave a slight nod. "However, they are not quick to place their trust in others. If you choose to be part of their lives, ensure that your commitments are ones you can fulfill." Garrett's jaw clenched. "I uphold my commitments." Mallory scrutinized him, as though weighing the possibility of trusting that claim. Following a lengthy silence, she gave a nod. "Excellent." In quiet observation, they beheld Sophie soar from the swing, her laughter ringing out in victory, soon echoed by Lily's joyful response. After a long time, Garrett sensed a change stirring within him. For the first time, he felt no fear towards it. The subsequent days unfolded in a manner that was entirely foreign to Garrett. His typical routine, orderly, methodical, and expected, had been upended by two tiny whirlwinds known as Lily and Sophie. Rather than engaging in a series of consecutive meetings and business discussions, he now faced a barrage of quick questions covering topics ranging from his preferred cuisine to whether he had ever battled a shark. He had anticipated a sense of distance, a hesitance in their interactions with him, yet that was not the nature of their dynamics. Initially, they approached him with caution, observing him as one would scrutinize an intriguing enigma. However, once they concluded that he was there to stay, they swiftly integrated him into their realm. It was a lot to take in, and oddly enough, he found it acceptable. On the fourth day, Mallory reached out to him. After completing his review of the contract, he leaned back in his office chair, taking a moment to reflect. "They keep asking when you'll return," she remarked before he had a chance to say hello. Garrett flashed a sly grin, stealing a glance at the clock. "Are you already feeling my absence?" Mallory let out a derisive snort. "Not I. Those individuals." He paused for just a moment before responding. "I will arrive in 1 hour." As he approached the house, the front door swung open, preempting his knock. Lily and Sophie rushed out, their faces beaming as they took hold of his hands. Sophie declared that Mom said we could go get ice cream. "Is it possible for us to do that?" Lily inquired, gazing up at him with large, expectant eyes. Garrett lifted an eyebrow in curiosity. "Are you aware that dinner time is approaching?" Lily nodded with a grave expression. That's why we need to leave before Mom has a change of heart. Mallory stood in the doorway, her arms crossed defiantly. I never consented to that prior to dinner. Lily and Sophie cast matching, imploring looks at their mother, their eyes brimming with theatrical purity. Mallory let out a deep breath. All right. However, in modest servings. The girls erupted in cheers as Garrett guided them toward the car. The journey was alive with lively conversation, as Lily and Sophie passionately argued about which flavors reigned supreme. Lily confidently proclaimed that chocolate is, without a doubt, the best. Sophie contended that it's quite elementary. Mint chocolate chip reigns supreme. Garrett wore a sly grin. Honestly, I tend to prefer the classic options. Both girls inhaled sharply, their expressions twisting into dramatic dismay. Mallory, seated in the passenger seat, shook her head in disbelief. Do you truly wish to be involved in their lives? Garrett chuckled, an action that still felt oddly effortless. I suppose it's time to refine my preferences. At the ice cream shop, the girls eagerly dove into selecting their flavors. While they dined, Sophie abruptly raised her gaze to him, her demeanor more solemn than typical. Will you be joining us for our birthday celebration? The inquiry took him by surprise. What date do you celebrate your birthday? Next month, Lily remarked, savoring the taste on her spoon. Garrett cast a quick look at Mallory, who observed him intently. He cast a glance over his shoulder at the twins. Absolutely, I'll be right here. Sophie regarded him intently for a prolonged moment before giving a nod. Understood. Garrett found himself pondering the significance of that one word. It seemed to carry a weight beyond mere recognition. It seemed like an examination. He was determined not to fail. A week went by, and Garrett discovered himself settling into a new cadence. One that seemed entirely unfamiliar yet strangely instinctive all at once. His existence had consistently been organized, regulated, with each instant meticulously noted. Yet now, his routine was punctuated by enthusiastic phone calls from Lily and Sophie, beckoning him to visit, along with the anticipation that he would indeed make an appearance. And he certainly did. Initially, he believed the twins would regard him as an outsider, a stranger in their midst. However, they welcomed him without reservation, drawing him straight into their vibrant reality. They expressed thoughts on every little detail, from the type of shoes he ought to don, to the films he must see, and even the way he should arrange his hair. He anticipated it would be draining. Rather, it was stabilizing. One evening, as he lingered in Mallory's kitchen, observing Lily and Sophie as they tried to guide him in the art of braiding hair with one of their dolls, an unsettling realization dawned on him. He hoped this would last forever. He had devoted his whole existence to the conviction that labor was paramount, that affection and kinship were mere diversions, and that feelings only rendered a man feeble. Yet, as he sat there, 2 6-year-olds giggling at his unsuccessful effort to braid synthetic blonde strands, he found it hard to recall what had led him to that thought in the first place. Mallory rested against the counter, observing the unfolding scene with a playful smirk. You've become completely entangled in their charm. Garrett looked up, a smirk playing on his lips. I'm not quite sure I understand your point. Sophie raised her gaze. Surprisingly, he has a knack for braiding. Lily gave a slight nod. Indeed, especially for someone just starting out. Mallory gave a slight shake of her head. They're simply showing kindness. The braid is quite a mess. Garrett let out a weary sigh as he placed the doll gently on the surface. All right, I acknowledge my loss. Sophie beamed with delight. With consistent effort, you'll see improvement. The idea nestled within him, a comforting yet strange sensation. Once the girls were tucked in for the night, Garrett lingered in the quiet room. Mallory offered him a cup of tea, a gesture she had consistently made during their time together. In those days when life felt more uncomplicated. He cradled the cup in his hands, observing her intently. You're allowing me to enter, he remarked after a pause. Mallory let out a breath, folding her arms across her chest. I suppose I am. What is the reason? She paused momentarily before responding. It's evident in the way their eyes linger on you. Your presence is appreciated by them. She cast her eyes toward the corridor leading to the twins' room. It seems they could really benefit from your presence. Garrett swallowed, the gravity of those words pressing down on him. What about you? Mallory chuckled softly, shaking her head in amusement. I'm still uncertain. He inclined his head, placing his cup gently on the table. That seems reasonable. They lingered in quietude for a moment, the atmosphere surrounding them now less charged than it had been weeks prior. Mallory let out a deep sigh at last. So you're definitely sticking around, huh? Garrett locked eyes with her. Indeed, I exist. For the first time, she chose not to confront him. For the first time in his life, he found himself not seeking an escape. Garrett had never envisioned that one fleeting instant could alter the trajectory of his existence so profoundly. For years, he held on to the conviction that mastery and exactness were the essential ingredients for achievement, viewing emotions as burdens and family as mere interruptions. Yet here he was once more in Mallory's kitchen, assisting Lily and Sophie in adorning cupcakes for their impending birthday, and he couldn't help but acknowledge how mistaken he had been. The kitchen resonated with joy, infused with the sweet aroma of vanilla. The twins were enveloped in a cloud of flour and frosting, their tiny hands creating a delightful chaos on the counter as they meticulously adorned the cupcakes with vibrant sprinkles. Garrett had attempted to assist, but after leaving a streak of blue icing on Sophie's nose and receiving a reprimand from Lily for disrupting the aesthetic, he found himself relegated to the task of cleaning up. Garrett observed Lily scrutinizing the cupcake with the intensity of a gourmet critic assessing a five-star dish. It must be flawless, she remarked, delicately arranging the sprinkles with precision. Today marks our special day. Sophie savored the sweet frosting as she licked it off her fingers. In my opinion, they appear satisfactory. Fine is simply not sufficient, Lily murmured. Garrett wore a sly grin. That reminds me of a certain individual. Mallory, observing from the other side of the kitchen, arched an eyebrow, curious about the source of that trait. Lily and Sophie completed their cupcakes and leaped down from their stools, pleased with their creation. Is it possible for us to share these with Mom? Lily inquired. Garrett gave a slight nod. Proceed. The girls dashed away, their joyous laughter echoing in the air. Once they disappeared from view, Mallory faced Garrett, her arms crossed defiantly. The topic of birthday gifts. Garrett rested against the counter. What is their story? Mallory cast him a glance. It seems like you're set on indulging them, aren't you? Garrett wore a sly grin. I'm not quite sure I understand your point, Garrett. He let out a deep breath, raising his hands in a gesture of defeat. All right, I might have taken things a tad too far. Mallory let out an exasperated sigh. How excessive. Let's just say a pony might play a role in this tale. She let out a weary groan. You actually got them a pony? Garrett wore a sly grin. In a technical sense, the purchase hasn't been made just yet. Mallory concealed her face behind her hands. This is hard to fathom. They truly deserve something extraordinary, he remarked, his tone gentler now. Mallory let her hands fall and locked eyes with him. They don't require elaborate displays, Garrett. Your presence is essential to them. He locked eyes with her, an unvoiced connection lingering in the air. Following a lengthy silence, he gave a nod. I understand. Mallory let out a resigned sigh, choosing not to engage in a debate. Instead, she cast her gaze toward the hallway where the girls had vanished. It's clear that your presence is truly appreciated, isn't it? Garrett gulped. I truly enjoy my time here. Mallory paused briefly, then offered him a faint smile. Then remain. Garrett hesitated before responding. There was no obligation on his part, for deep down he was already aware. He was staying put. Not at this moment. Never. This narrative transcends the mere account of a billionaire uncovering the existence of his offspring. It revolves around accountability, atonement, and the understanding that genuine achievement is not quantified by riches but by the connections we foster. Garrett begins as an individual who is convinced he holds the reins to every aspect of his life. His career, his emotions, his future. However, the entrance of Lily and Sophie disrupts all his previous assumptions. Initially, he grapples with uncertainty, trying to find his place in their realm. As the narrative progresses, he comes to understand that fatherhood isn't defined by extravagant displays or monetary stability. Rather, it lies in the simple act of being present. Lily and Sophie, though still quite young, actively contribute to his transformation rather than remaining mere bystanders. They are the catalysts for his growth, insisting on authenticity and engagement. Their purity and wonder compel Garrett to face the decisions he's taken and the existence he's been evading. Mallory also plays an essential role in his journey. She represents more than just the mother of his children. She embodies a reflection of his past and a challenge for his future potential. Her hesitation to allow him back into their lives stems not from bitterness, but from a desire to safeguard the daughters she has nurtured on her own. The allure of the conclusion lies not in flawlessness, but in the journey of advancement. Garrett doesn't transform into the ideal father in an instant, nor does Mallory place her trust in him right away. What truly elevates the ending is his decision to remain. He consistently makes the effort to be present, day after day, demonstrating not only to Mallory and the girls but also to himself that he desires to be a part of this family. The climactic moment, when he understands that he is not merely a transient figure in their lives, but rather someone who truly belongs, is what imbues the narrative with its profound significance. Ultimately, Garrett Hale acquires not only daughters but also a newfound purpose that extends beyond his empire.